Chris, what is our fifth main topic today?
This comes from Chris Snyder. There have been reports that Warner Brothers is gearing up for a big overhaul for DC. According to internet research, essentially, this would mean that's a good chance that DC will be getting its own studio like Marvel Studios over at Disney. This is a big deal. No doubt there'll be major changes coming to the DCEU, one way or another, as they want a, quote, someone like Kevin Feige to oversee everything. The right play, or is the DCEU too much of a mess to correct without starting completely fresh?
All right, thanks a lot for saying that in, Chris. And yeah, let the dominoes start to fall. One of probably the biggest news in entertainment this year has been the fact that Discovery has purchased Warner Media. That includes Warner Brothers, that includes HBO. They are now the owner of it, and the new company name is now Warner Brothers Discovery. And that's the new company, and there is a new boss in town in the name of David Zaslav, who is basically Bob Iger now of this entire thing. He's the boss and the guy in charge. And he's making some changes. Apparently, he's making big changes. And this isn't coming from Gus's movie reviews, gasstation.fart.
Love that site.
I love them. They're great. All the scoops. This is coming from Variety. That is saying they are looking at what they're referring to as a massive overhaul of everything at DC.
Right.
Because apparently David Zaslav believes the key to the true profitability of this new media company is the DC properties and the DC characters, which number one is like, oh my God, you mean the DC characters are actually going to be at a studio that a studio thinks they're a priority and thinks there's value there? Well, that's a step in the right direction right off the bat, right there. So this is great. This is fantastic. But what could this new move look like, and how does it really change everything? I want to read a bunch of this article because instead of trying to paraphrase a bunch of it, let's just hear what Variety had to say and why this is like so significant for what's going on over here. Okay, so we'll start with this. The new owners of all things Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are exploring an overhaul of DC Entertainment, multiple sources close to the situation told Variety. It's been less than a week since Discovery closed its $43 billion deal for Warner Media, less than what, what's his name is going to buy Twitter for.
Elon
Musk is going to buy Twitter for. But anyway, since Disney closed its $43 billion deal for Warner Media, joining one of the largest producers of reality programming with one of the most venerable entertainment brands under the new moniker of Warner Brothers Discovery. David Zaslav, the new boss, the CEO of the combined companies, and top leadership have been toying with the idea of turning DC into its own solidified content vertical, the sources said. All right, let's stop there for a second. Right there is major, major, major change. Over at Disney, they understood, look, Marvel is its own thing. We've got to give it its own division. Now, unfortunately, Bob Chapek has eroded some of that and taking a lot of the authority that Kevin Feige used to have away, but still, it's its own vertical. They create their own brand of movies, television programs, other things like that. Now they have their own animation studio as well. And they get to function and be dedicated to that, and they have their own oversight, and that has worked. Not that that's the only way it can work, but it has worked. Meanwhile, over at Warner Brothers DC, they have had no less than 5 major leadership shakeups in the last 8 years. Now, it sounded like at the time when they brought in, not Kevin Tsujihara, that's the former CEO, who was the guy it looked like he was going to be the new sheriff in town over at DC.
Walter Hamada?
Walter Hamada, thank you. It looked like at first when Walter Hamada was coming in that he was going to be that guy and be given that breadth of responsibility and authority. But it was all smokescreen. He certainly had some authority and some responsibility, but it was still a giant committee of people that were constantly being rotated in and out. I think it was Anna Sarnoff was the one who was kind of orchestrating that whole circus. So it was never really solidified or made to be given the type of system that had served Kevin Feige and the folks at Marvel so well. So the very fact that David Zaslav now comes in and says, hey, I'm looking up the road there in Burbank because their offices are only about 5 minutes away from each other. I'm looking up the road there at Disney, and looks like they got their own studio for Marvel. They have their own leadership structure. They have their own vertical process. And they were able to make some pretty good stuff and have some consistency in leadership without 85 different hands coming into the soup.
Right.
This might be a good idea. Maybe. Who knows? I told you that David Zaslav taking over this thing was going to be good, and it's already paying off. Let's keep going in this article, though, because it goes further. The move would potentially affect DC feature film development in the Warner Brothers Pictures Group, streaming series at Warner Brothers Television, and the creative arm within DC proper, all in an effort to have the disparate elements more closely aligned in order to maximize the value of the superhero stable, one often seen as punching up against Marvel. And look, a lot of people cry and complain, and I get it, when, you compare DC to Marvel, but that is the reality. That we shouldn't be comparing the success of one to the other, but you cannot help it. Marvel has been crushing it for 14 years, and DC has had to celebrate the odd victory here and there. Where it's been one big, long ticker-tape parade for 14 years for Marvel. It's like, yay, Aquaman made $1 billion. Great. Then we had this and this and this. But yay, this other thing made... Okay, but then we had this, and this. And they're looking at, and David Zaslav is already recognizing there is great value in these characters if they are managed properly, and they got to start by acknowledging we are being compared to Marvel and their success and their victories, and we've got to do something about it. The article goes on. It gets even more interesting. Before the merger closed, Zaslav vetted candidates with experience in creating and nurturing blockbuster intellectual property with the goal of potentially finding someone to serve as the creative and strategic czar, similar to what Marvel has in Kevin Feige. One of those candidates included Emma Watts, which is why her name was brought up the other day, a former top film executive of 20th Century and Paramount, but it does not appear that Watts will take the job. One insider suggested that Zaslav was less interested in finding a creative guru and more eager to hire someone who had the type of business background needed to keep all the different factions at DC working more harmoniously. Insiders say that Zaslav believes that the success of the merger, Insiders say that Zaslav believes that the success of the merger, one that has left the company highly leveraged, will rest in no small part on unlocking the full potential of the DC Comics universe of characters. Discovery insiders believe that although DC has achieved cinematic success with recent films such as Aquaman and The Batman, it lacks a coherent creative and brand strategy. Discovery believes that several top-shelf characters such as Superman have been left to languish and need to be revitalized. They also believe that projects like Todd Phillips' Joker are shining examples of how second-build characters from DC's library can and should be exploited. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is another example. Is it hyperbole to say I've been waiting for over a decade to hear this kind of stuff? That I've been waiting for somebody to come along and say, holy crap, you know what? DC characters matter. We should be treating them with some respect. We should be creating a creative outlet and a creative flow and structure that allows them to flourish and do well. We should get creative and business acumen put in there to oversee and bring some synergy to this whole thing instead of this disparate thing that Warner Brothers has constantly fostered. They also talk about how, we recognize shared cinematic universe, but we also recognize we got to exploit things like the Joker that are outside of all that kind of stuff. We got to start bringing this thing more seriously. We need to get somebody in charge who's got the vision for it, the business acumen to organize it all and to run it properly and to go from there. Look, I don't want to oversell it because this could all end in disaster, but I'm just going to say this. As a lifelong fan of DC characters, it is so refreshing for me to hear that this is at least the philosophy that David Zaslav and the folks at Discovery are bringing to DC and Warner Brothers. A strategy and an approach that has worked bonkers for them with all of their other mini networks that fall under Discovery, and they're going to bring that to this, because if it works small, it'll work big. As Jesus once said himself, he who's responsible with little will be responsible with much. And that's why I believe Jesus says that this is going to work. Jesus says that DC is destined for great things.
Happy Easter, y'all.
Happy Easter, everybody. He is risen indeed. We want to take a moment and thank the sponsor of this video, ExpressVPN. Now, guys, does it make sense that the same company who controls half the online retail also passively eavesdrops on your private conversations at home? Or what about the idea that a single company controls 90% of the internet searches, runs your email service, and gets to track everything you do on your smartphone? You guys know that big tech is more powerful than most countries are, and they profit by exploiting your personal data. It's time to put a layer of protection between your online activity and these tech juggernauts, and that's why I use ExpressVPN. You see, when you run ExpressVPN on your device, the software hides your IP address, something that big tech companies can use to personally identify you. So ExpressVPN makes your activity harder to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your internet data to keep you safe from hackers and eavesdroppers on your network. So stop handing over your personal data to the big tech monopoly that mines your activity and sells your information. Protect yourself with a VPN that I trust to keep me safe online. Visit expressvpn.com/Campea. That's expressvpn.com/Campea to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/Campea right now to learn more. So look, again, I'm acknowledging this could go very bad. It could still be same old, same old. This could just be a lot of talk and no action. But I, for one, am very excited. I've been telling you all for about a year now, since they announced that Discovery was going to take over Warner Media. I said, I think this is going to be a really, really good thing. And I think we're off to a good start. But again, Rob, talk is cheap. They're talking about it. Let's see what they can actually do. But you hear these words. What stands out to you when you're listening to this?
All right, I don't want to be the fly in the ointment on Good Friday. All right, I just want to say that I agree with you that all of this sounds great. It all sounds sound. Here's the problem. They don't have anyone that can do it. The problem, they're talking, all of this sounds great. It's all corporate speak. What they do not understand, they're looking at all of these things as yet another product. And here's what people will never, they just don't get. Kevin Feige is one of us. He's an imagination connoisseur. He's a geek. He's a nerd. He worked for Richard Donner. He worked for Avi Arad. He produced, in a producerial capacity, 14 Marvel projects before the MCU, if you include Man-Thing. It was 13, but if you include Man-Thing, it's 14. His life's work is to make Marvel product. And he understands it the way we as old school geeks do. And at the same time, he has been trained in how to make movies. There is no one.
There are thousands of them.
In working in Hollywood today, that have produced movies that are also geeks, that understand from a producerial capacity the reason Marvel is successful is because Marvel is the studio and they're also the creatives together. Warner Brothers has kept their studio structure separate from the creatives or underneath the executives. And the executives don't understand these properties. They are corporate entities. They're people that they're Ivy League educated business people. And they look at these properties as corporate product because that's what they were trained to do, which I understand. Kevin Feige is a story guy. He's a geek guy who also learned how to make movies. He's both. And what he does is he works synergistically with a filmmaker. He'll go and go, James Gunn has made 2 $3 million movies, Slither and Super. That sensibility is amazing. Warner Brothers would never hire James Gunn before someone like Kevin Feige hired him. A studio like Warner Brothers will never hire an indie. Even Christopher Nolan had to come in and make Insomnia first. He'd made Memento, great indie film. Warner Brothers had to see, he made Memento, but can he make a studio movie? He made Insomnia, worked with 2 big Hollywood actors. Oh, this guy can work within the studio system. Nothing's going on with Batman. We'd love to resurrect Batman. We don't really know, but this guy, he's got something. Let's try him out. Kevin Feige doesn't try people out. Kevin Feige goes, you know what? I'm going to go get the Russo brothers. They've never made a franchise property, but I know that they can make Winter Soldier. I know they can do it. Warner Brothers doesn't have that.
Here, okay, let me remind you something of the major flaw in your logic here. You're missing, there's a gaping hole in your logic here. This isn't the Warner Brothers that we had last week. This is under a brand new owner who has shown with 7 different networks that he knows exactly how to facilitate, how to empower, and how to finance, how to support, and let that go. You're talking about a Warner Brothers that doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about they still need a Kevin Feige. And I'm saying there isn't one. There's nobody, whether it's Emma Watts, there is no one in Hollywood that is trained and is the kind of geek person that Kevin Feige is. And the problem is they're going to wind up with the same look. All their movies that have been successful, Todd Phillips with Joker, Christopher Nolan with the Batman movies, James Wan with Aquaman. Those were auteurs that were allowed to make what they wanted to make. They were not working under an umbrella of corporate synergy between all of these different franchises. Let's make Aquaman work into the Zack Snyder universe. They didn't have to do that. James Wan was allowed to make the movie he wants to make. Todd Phillips was allowed to make the movie he wants to make. Christopher Nolan made his Batman trilogy. What they're talking about is this synergy between all of these different characters, brands. They need one person who can produce movies and understand all of these properties. They don't have that. David Zaslav wants that. He absolutely would empower somebody, but he doesn't have the person he needs. He even says, he's like, I looked at Emma Watts. She doesn't want the job because Emma Watts is a studio executive. She's not a creative executive. She's great. I've been in a room with her. She's very, very good at recognizing things, but she's not Kevin Feige. And the problem is there isn't another one of him.
But here's the thing. I get so sick of this because I hear this all the time from everybody, all the things that only that person can do that. Well, we only say that because we've only seen that person do that.
Right.
Remember, Kevin Feige wasn't Kevin Feige until he was Kevin Feige.
No, but
right?
he was forged. It took years.
Yeah, but there are many, like you and I know a couple of producers who are absolute geeks and absolute thing. What I'm saying is that to say that Kevin Feige is the only guy who can do what he does, that's incredibly myopic. But because Kevin Feige himself wasn't that guy that everybody now knows and reveres.
No, but
until he kind of slowly grew into that. I believe there is somebody out there that, given the opportunity, given the support, given the empowerment to actually, because that's what these Warner Brothers has to do, because I would completely agree with you 2 weeks ago that Warner Brothers is not the place and they're incapable of doing it. They have a rotating door of whose leadership here and there. Now this person's in charge, now that person's in charge. It's like an NFL quarterback who's like, fuck guys, I've had 5 head coaches in 7 years. We need some consistency there, and Warner Brothers hasn't been that. But my argument is this: David Zaslav has proved, when everybody says it couldn't be done, who would have ever believed that Discovery could buy Warner Media? David Zaslav has proved
he's great
over and over and over and over and over and over again that he can take something and cultivate it, finance it, empower it, and to bring it to success. And I think it is folly to believe that he's incapable of doing that with
I'm not
DC.
saying he's
He
not
absolutely
incapable
is.
of it.
He will find the person that can do it.
You know what? It was Bob Iger who brought Marvel into the fold. You know, and remember, the MCU started at Paramount. It was not Kevin Feige did not start
all
at
over
Disney.
the place, yeah.
But I mean Kevin Feige, who has produced, people say like Chuck Roven. Chuck Roven is a great producer, but he's a nuts and bolts producer. If you look at how many DC movies, who in Hollywood has produced 14 DC movies and came up under Avi Arad, worked for Richard Donner. The education, people talk about, the studios always want to hire Ivy League educated MBA business people. That's part of their hiring criteria. If you went by Kevin Feige and said, we want to hire somebody like Kevin Feige, who produced 14 Marvel movies, who worked for Richard Donner, who directed Superman the movie, there isn't anyone. And the problem is they want somebody who understands these characters synergistically. yet they can't also produce movies. And Kevin Feige has a skill set that has been honed over years, now decades, and no one ever in the history of Hollywood has done what he's done.
Not yet.
That's
But
right.
it can be. That's the thing. Everybody talks about something that can be done.
Right, but the question is, who is that person now?
Well, I mean, I don't know who that person is, but
Thanks to Masterclass, you can watch Bob Iger
to teach you
how to
exactly
do these
how
things.
To, no,
Yeah.
but again, I think it's an incredibly limited point of view to say, well, this is the only person that's done it. That means nobody else can do it.
I'm not
except
saying
that
no one else
person.
can do it. The question is, he's looking for hires, and he went after, in this article, he went after Emma Watts.
Well, he didn't go after Emma Watts, but Emma Watts was in the running.
But there's probably in terms of what he wants, I'll bet you there's less than 5 people they're looking at. In all of the people on this planet, there's probably 5. And none of them check all the boxes. And they're left with, well, what do we do?
Isn't that a
Who do we go
problem
with?
in and of itself? To believe that we know what the boxes are, that Kevin Feige has done it this way, therefore, only that model can possibly equal success. We've seen 1,000 times that that's not the case, right?
Well, but
they don't have to find another Kevin Feige. They have to find somebody who's got the ability to do something in a different environment that Kevin Feige's in. And I just think the problem with Warner Brothers all these years has been they haven't had the vision, they haven't had the trust, they haven't had the stability, and they haven't had the foresight to empower somebody to evolve and become. Because remember, the key thing with Kevin Feige was that during this forging you're talking about, he was cultivated and he was given the width and the breadth to get those experience. And then little by little, he was entrusted, given that ability, and they stuck with him. That's something that Warner Brothers never did. And if Warner Brothers can get somebody who is bright, has a great creative mind, has a great sense of production, and understands Hollywood, and there are those people out there, and then gives them what they need to succeed, like Kevin Feige has, it's not going to be easy. It's a 1 in 1,000. But it absolutely can work if you have the right leadership.
Look, all I'm pointing out here is that Feige worked on Singer's X-Men, Raimi's Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Elektra, Daredevil, Punisher.
Yes, exactly.
And he saw all of these. He worked on all these
but
projects.
people would have looked at that resume and said, this guy produced all that shit? But Marvel saw that this is a guy with experience, and then they entrusted that.
Well, no. Remember, he was working for Avi Arad, too.
Yes.
He was working with what the Marvels was. I mean, when they were the architect, I mean, he created the MCU. The idea, and they started to the point where they're like, you know what we're going to try? We're going to try this. And what are we going to start with? Iron Man. Do you think Warner Brothers would have done that? Warner Brothers is a corporate structure. Kevin Feige was able to thrive without a corporate structure, and he created something that didn't exist before. Warner Brothers has a hard time. They would have a hard time dealing with that because they are a corporation. They have to make decisions where they're beholden to their shareholders. They don't have time to cultivate somebody.
You're acting like Kevin Feige didn't have direct reports and bosses. He had to answer to Ike Perlmutter. He was, as much as you like to pretend he wasn't, he was absolutely in a corporate structure the entire time. Like once everything started rolling. But the difference was, other than Ike Perlmutter, which I think we would agree, he had competent, forward-thinking leadership above him in the form of Alan Horn and Bob Iger. Because without them, there is no Kevin Feige.
You guys are missing the point. All of them had to answer to Mickey Mouse.
Right?
Well, no, I mean, no, but look, he didn't, look, Kevin Feige, here's the difference. When you're making a movie, when you're producing a movie, it doesn't matter who's the overlord, who's releasing it, what studio is releasing it. All you're concentrating on is that movie. You don't have to worry about corporate synergy. It's like, we have to make a good Spider-Man movie, a good X-Men movie, a good this. Now, Kevin Feige didn't have control over that. He saw what worked. He saw what didn't. He saw what directors could make things work. He saw what directors, not so good. He didn't have control. And he worked his way up, working on all these different things. Some worked and some didn't. His track record, but it wasn't his track record. His job was to get these movies produced. But what he learned was what makes one of these movies better than another. So when he went all in and they raised money to start the MCU and to make Iron Man, it was like, he was the guy that made sure Robert Downey Jr. got hired.
Let let me just say
Warner
one-
Brothers would never hire Robert Downey Jr.
Again, you keep talking about Warner Brothers like it's still 2 weeks ago. This is a brand new company.
It's still a corporation.
But
and
so
they
is Disney. And I think
Yeah, but
like,
Disney acquired
Disney's
the
more of
MCU
a
after it was successful.
Yes, but they are a corporation nonetheless. And it thrived under that corporation. It grew under that
But they
corporation.
had autonomy.
No,
Bob-
they didn't.
Bob-
They did not
Bob
have
Iger-
autonomy.
All right, all right,
No,
all right,
no,
all
no,
right.
no. That's the fairy tale. They never had autonomy. If you don't think that Kevin Feige had to have every check signed, every decision approved by Alan Horn, Bob Iger,
Of course he did.
So
but
that
they,
is the same corporate structure.
But they didn't interfere with his creative.
They absolutely did. They absolutely did. Kevin Feige talks all the time about the fact that he learned everything that he learned from Alan Horn. that Alan Horn protected him from some mistakes he was going to do. That means there was obvious corporate.
Of course, because he understands how to work synergistically. That's his whole.
Because he
that's
had
his whole.
bosses that knew how to work synergistically.
Can I
and
say-
give him that leeway.
Can I break this up one time?
Hey guys, we want to take a moment and thank the sponsor of today's video, Peloton. Now listen, in the never-ending quest to try to stay in shape, one of the keys is to vary up your workout and your exercises to make sure you avoid losing your motivation and keep from getting burnt out from doing the same thing over and over again. Peloton has you covered. I know for me, one of the keys was getting my Peloton tread and using the Peloton app to get my varied workouts in. And Peloton just keeps pushing you forward with new classes, new music, new ways to keep your workouts fun and motivating. One of the newer offerings that has me personally really excited is their boxing classes. Peloton is stepping into the ring with its newest discipline, and you don't even have to have any gloves. Discover a fast, furious, and fun workout with Peloton instructors in your corner. Even if you've never boxed before, these classes will have you working up a sweat while working on the fundamentals of form, footwork, and fun combos that will keep you on your toes. Peloton has a workout for every day and every kind of schedule. So guys, right now, visit onepeloton.com to learn more. That's ONEPELOTON.com.
Just for a second. We all love DC. We like DC. They shouldn't touch the animation. I think the animation movies, I enjoy them. Whoever they put in the seat, they need time to they're going to fail, but they're going to need time to actually get into the flow of everything. And so as long as they give them a proper chance, I think they could succeed as long as they agree with that person's vision and they strive to succeed, then it should only go up from here. You know what I mean? But that it doesn't, we can't name any names because who knows who it would be.
I was gonna
The
say, we don't
only
work
thing
there.
that I would say about this is the difference is that you have to understand the characters, the universe, and the appeal. And how do these things work? You can't just say Batman is a corporate product without understanding why does Batman work? Why is Batman endured? And a guy like Kevin Feige understands that. Alan Horn does not. Alan Horn is a guy that understands how to get the money to make these Batman movies.
1,000% disagree with you. Kevin Feige would disagree with you. Kevin Feige has talked about the creative vision and how he understands it all. So I think you're dead wrong about that.
Well, I
On that
might
point, I
very
think you're
well
dead
be,
wrong.
but I might very well be. But you know what? If that were the case, then all of our IPs that are owned by corporations would be successful.
But that's what I'm saying. Look,
The Star Wars
but look
movies
at
from
Disney.
Force Awakens to Rise of Skywalker dropped $1 billion in grosses. That's huge.
But they all made billions. And see, that's the thing. So under Disney, doesn't matter. Billions, except for one movie, billions. If you look at Disney structure, right? You got Disney Animation, huge success. Pixar, huge success.
Pixar's they're allowed to make what they need to make.
But under the guidance,
Question for you.
understanding, and authority of Alan Horn.
Of course, but
now
Alan
it's
Horn's not telling Pixar what
all
to
I'm saying
make.
to you is this, is that if you think that Kevin Feige's success is completely divorced from the fact that it was under the leadership of Disney and their leaders,
I
okay,
don't.
That's okay. So here's the thing. That would be a more coherent argument if it was the only thing that worked at Disney. Disney has a corporate structure and leadership with the right people in place, who know how to foster and let their individual things grow, develop, and become huge successes. one big mistake was George Lucas wanting Kathy Kennedy to be the head of Lucasfilm.
Done before Disney.
But that was done before Disney, right? So that's the one glaring error on the thing. But like you said, it was done before Disney. So, and yet they still make billions of dollars. My point is that if you look back at the track record of Kevin Feige and what he was before, nobody would have looked at him and said, unless you were a leader with great vision and you were able to understand what was there, most people would have looked at Kevin Feige. Everybody watching this show right now would have looked at the list of the movies that he produced and all that kind of stuff. And those of us with more limited vision would have gone, well, he would be a terrible choice to run a studio. But there were other people who realized, as you have pointed out, there were other people who realized, no, this guy's got experience. He's got a passion for this subject matter. Let's invest in him. Let's give him some trust. Let's let him start to develop stuff himself. And what I'm saying is, to believe that can never be done again with anybody else,
I'm just saying.
I just don't think, I think that's a very short-sighted view. I think somebody else can do that if given the right set of circumstances as Kevin Feige was given.
Look, who's going to have time from 2000 to 2008? All those comic book movies that were made in those 8 years, Kevin Feige worked. He didn't have control. He could work on them in a producerial capacity, but he himself could not exert control and go, that's not a very good idea, because he wasn't at that level yet. What he did was he took everything that he learned, the right things, the wrong things, and then he was able to create the MCU.
So he grew into what he became.
Right, but you have somebody who's going to have 8 years to grow into that?
No, it'll be a different path. Everybody has a different path to where they're trying to get.
I'm just saying that David Zaslav is talking about hiring somebody right now. Who are you going to hire? They're looking to hire somebody right now.
I know, but most people would never have known the name of Kevin Feige before.
Right,
I'm saying
they would have, because he worked on.
Question is for you guys.
No. I gotta get the heart of this, because essentially, like, you'll say, no, you're not saying this, but everything you've been saying is that no one else can possibly shepherd DC.
I'm not saying no one else can.
Okay,
I'm saying
no
one
can't find somebody.
I'm saying there is no one to find.
Yeah, so you are saying you can't find somebody. There's nobody to find.
There's nobody yet. Right? They've had people.
Okay, I got to move. We're going to move this over to Chris.
Both
you and I have talked on this way too much. Chris, your thoughts on this whole thing?
I really don't have a horse in this race, y'all.
How do you follow that up?
I was gonna say, I was just causing chaos in the chat, being like, which dad do you want? Who do you agree with? We get Christmas and Hanukkah this year, everyone. No, I think it's a time will tell situation, right? I'm very excited about the prospect of having a designated studio, because why wouldn't you have done that in the first place?
You have to have that.
Yeah.
You definitely have to have a separate, so they're not always under the watchful eyes. Maybe they could,
They need to have their own people who are focused in this comic book world and making these comic books the love letters they should be. That's the big thing, is you just need somebody who's passionate, has a clear vision, and that might be difficult to find the right vision, right?
Yeah.
So, time will tell.
Because under Warner Brothers, I mean, the Harry Potter series has done well. It's not impossible to get a franchise or a whole set of things to be good, right? I mean, basically all the Harry Potter movies in general.
One of the most successful franchises.
Yeah, we're good, right?
Do you know why that is?
No, John. No.
No, but I'll tell you why. Because Diane Nelson, who used to be the president of DC Entertainment when she was before she was head of global brand management and Warner Premiere, she was the woman who brought J.K. Rowling into the studio, and she said, "Listen, we will bring you and make you a part of this project," and because she wasn't going to sell. It was Diane Nelson who said, "We will give you oversight over your own property." And she was instrumental in making sure that Harry Potter was kept pure.
So they did it once.
Right.
But that's a different thing. She wasn't a movie producer.
But everything is a different thing.
I will say there could and there probably will be another Kevin Feige. I just believe that. That's because us humans, we always improve upon improving. That's why records are broken. There's always going to be another coming of somebody who does it better. And hopefully it'll be DC, the DC guy, because we will all benefit from it.
This is something they've been looking for a long time.
But the wrong people have been looking for it. That's been the problem. You've had a bunch of incompetent boobs over at Warner Brothers for so long that have never known who to look for, or were looking for the right characteristics in somebody. And that's why Warner Brothers for so long has had this constant merry-go-round of, now this person's in charge. Now Ben Affleck is one of the guys in charge. Now, I can't remember the name of the comic book writer. They put one of the comic book writers. Jeff Johns. Now Jeff Johns is in charge. Now Anna Sarnoff's in charge. But now this person's in charge. And that's been part of the problem. But now you've got a new guy in charge. Now you've got your Bob Iger type in charge, and David Zaslav, who doesn't suffer that kind of bullshit. He's like, no. We're number one. We're going to create its own vertical and give them their own studio so that they have their own internal structure and their own internal process that is not a part of the overall company's process. And they are given a certain degree of autonomy that Marvel's been allowed to have over there. That's number one. Number two, we need to not have a committee of people, which is what Warner Brothers has been trying to do forever. They need to not have a committee. We need to dedicate ourselves to doing an exhaustive search to find a person that we believe will have the kind of vision that we can start to develop DC to reaching the potential that it's always had, but it's always been squandered under former leadership and management. What I'm simply saying here is that right now, Zaslav and the new leadership over there, now that they've kicked all the other dead weight out of Warner Brothers, they are doing everything right now. Now, it is not going to be easy to find somebody who can forget Marvel, forget Kevin Feige. It's not going to be easy to find somebody that can take a brand new studio, because that's what DC will be, a brand new studio, and take it to billion-dollar heights, because it's only really happened a handful of times in history where they're talking about Bond, Marvel, Star Wars, Harry Potter. It's only happened a handful of times in the century-long of Hollywood history. It's not going to be easy. But Ray, what you said was exactly right. There's always a record broken and everybody says that will never be done again, but it is. And I think they can find somebody, hopefully, that will lead them to maybe not equal Marvel success, but there's always somebody next.
And they're off to a great start with the Batman. They got that right there already under
them. But you can't give credit to David Zaslav for that.
You can't do that. But it is a great start because people are excited to see the next one. So, like, you got at least something there with nothing.
Agreed. They Warner Brothers is best when they're picking auteurs to bring their own vision to the screen.
Just bring the Flash, please. Whoever it is, get this Flash movie out. Get this Flash movie out, even if it's trash.
It doesn't. So, you and I are gonna fight now.
Andy Muschietti is at Warner Brothers. They're friends of filmmakers. They've always been that way at the studio. And Andy Muschietti made the It movies, very, very successful. Give him the Flash, probably very successful. The same way that Todd Phillips did the Hangover movies. The same way that James Wan already proved himself at another studio. He made $1 billion. So, which is great.
Well, I just want to wish them luck, and hopefully we get something good from this reboot is much needed for DC. The studio, their own studio, like Chris said.
By the way, they never said they're rebooting.
Oh man, I meant just a reboot as a restructure.
I hope they do.
Yeah.
I think a reboot.
I think that'd be great. Clean slate.
Clean slate would be
because there's nothing on their slate because the Flash doesn't.
Because Marvel's by themselves right now on this island, and there's room for other people to join. Hopefully it's DC.
But it is, to Rob's point, though, it is going to take time. Because
a lot of time.
With Kevin Feige where he is now, Kevin Feige earned over time the fact that, like you were talking about Warner Brothers with a lot of auteur filmmakers, that doesn't exist at Marvel because everything is controlled by Kevin Feige, right? Every director who signs up with Kevin Feige has to understand Kevin Feige, our Lord and Savior Kevin Feige, he is the ultimate studio interference guy. Right? No director in Marvel is ever allowed to take their movie and make it whatever they want. Everything is overseen very, very carefully by Kevin Feige, and everything has to follow his blueprint. Was it Mark Ruffalo? I think you were quoting Mark Ruffalo the other day, who pointed out, Kevin Feige doesn't get enough credit for how much he's actually in charge and makes all this stuff.
Remember, dude.
So it's going to take somebody a while to build that level of trust.
We're 22 years into Kevin Feige producing Marvel movies.
14 into the MCU.
14 into the end. 22. I mean, that, and before that, working for Richard Donner at Warner Brothers in the 90s.
That's a hell of a head start.
Yeah.
Against this new guy.
It's going to take time. It's definitely going to take time. But Warner Brothers, part of the things that we've always criticized Warner Brothers about is that they've had no sense of patience. I was just watching a Grammy Award win. I don't know who it was. I saw this clip on YouTube somebody played for me. It was somebody winning an award. It might have been a Lifetime Achievement Award. And they said, slowly, is the fastest way to accomplish something.
Oh, it's the actor from Hadestown.
That's who it was. Yes.
Yeah.
Slowly is the fastest way to accomplish something. And one of the big problems that a lot of people have criticized Warner Brothers for over the years is that they just try to come out of the gate and be what Marvel already was. And I think if they can, number one, stay patient, number two, focus on making good movies, and then start to give more trust to somebody to be more studio interference and be that studio interference like Kevin Feige is, that can actually coordinate and run that whole thing, it's going to take time. Because you're right. As of right now, there is nobody like Kevin Feige, but there are a number of people who are Kevin Feige as he was a decade ago.
But, you know, also, I find like they're talking about making this synergy between all the DC characters.
That's what Kevin Feige does for Marvel.
I think what Warner Brothers has done is something different. You know, the Nolan Batman trilogy.
Yes.
Constant success. James Wan, out of the gate, $1 billion. There's no reason to think Aquaman 2 won't make another
Very
billion.
excited for that.
So there's that could be another trilogy. So if and you've got Andy Muschietti doing I don't know about you know, whether there's going to be more that's a different thing.
I trust Andy Muschietti.
I mean, you've got homeboy, what's his face, who's making Shazam.
Oh, the Lights Out guy.
David.
Yeah.
No, not Jamais Colette. It's,
why am I drawing a blank?
It's Sandberg.
Sandberg. Sandberg, he's doing it. He might, I would imagine his Shazam trilogy will, again, if he does a trilogy.
Hopefully.
So Warner Brothers, their strength as a studio has always been to support filmmakers. That's what they do best. Clint Eastwood has been at Warner Brothers, Malpaso for what, 45, 50 years?
Yep.
That's their strength. That's always
build
been
those relationships.
Sometimes you also got to recognize when your strength is actually holding you back a little bit. And in the case of Kevin Feige and Warner Brothers, one of the problems with Warner Brothers being, I think with everything else it's great, but with Warner Brothers, I think that strength of theirs has been a weakness because it's prevented them from creating a cohesive cinematic world the way Kevin Feige was able to create a cohesive cinematic, because every director was just allowed to do whatever they want to do. And while that is great for a regular studio making regular movies, if you're trying to create a cohesive cinematic universe, you can't just let all the directors run around making whatever they want, right?
Can't.
I think they need to, if they can't do it, they just need to drop the whole shared cinematic universe. I've enjoyed all their one-offs or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think what they look at is the big payoff. If we have a shared universe, we'll make all these movies, and then we'll have those big movies at the end where we put all of it together and get all that money. I just think they're looking ahead way too much and trying to connect way too much. Well, they just need to get some successful franchises. Mm-hmm. Like, let's say this next Shazam movie or Black Adam movie is good. Keep that director, have him direct the sequel. Hopefully it's good. And then you do that with The Flash and everything else. And then you could start concentrating on how to connect things.
Well, look, I would say this too. The one advantage that I think, something that Warner Brothers could do better than what Marvel has done, and you were just alluding to this, Rob, was the idea that, hey guys, not everything has to be shared cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Why don't you have a shared cinematic universe and have some thrilling, fantastic one-shot or standoff isolated movies like Joker, like the Batman? That's one thing that I really wish Kevin Feige would do as well. It's like, hey, you got the MCU. Now tell some one-off stories that aren't connected to the MCU. And that's one way that Warner Brothers might be able to differentiate themselves a bit, do you think?
Look, as you have pointed out, David Zaslav, great success. He Discovery bought Warner Brothers. And
I still can't wrap my head around
that. And why you and I have talked about, we're both very excited about his tenure at Warner Brothers. He has allowed the creatives, he said this, of his various shows, he lets them do what they do. And having a corporate overlord that feels that way is great. It's great. And I love, like you're pointing out, this new philosophy. Awesome. I'm excited. I love Warner Brothers. It's probably my favorite studio. My only point about this whole thing was that it's going to be hard to find somebody.
And on that, we agree. It ain't going to be easy.
No.
It's going to be hard.
But I think we also agree that we're very excited about David Zaslav tenure at the studio.
So excited.
And I don't want to ever, with this conversation we got into, I want people to not understand. I thought this was a quality debate. This is why the
Yeah.
show is good.
Oh yeah.
The
yeah.
internet gets
But-
very worried and thinks you guys are going to get a divorce.
Oh, no,
Everyone's
God.
fine.
No. But because
It'd be boring if
we're
everyone
both
thought the
coming
same
at this from
thing.
the same place. I mean, I love this new regime at Warner Brothers. I think it's going to be great. I'm only worried because
It ain't gonna
I
be-
won't mention something.
Please
I won't
don't
mention.
say Star
I won't.
Trek.
It's in Joanna,
I
baby.
didn't say it. I didn't say it. But I'm just saying that having a guy like David Zaslav is going to be good for Warner Brothers.
Can we say this? That first of all, you liked what we just heard from David Zaslav and what
I did.
and what he told me.
Because the idea is sound.
Right. So can we agree here? Do we all agree when we say, if I say make this statement, today DC is in a better position for potential success than it was yesterday?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
That is something we can all get
100%.
excited.
And there's more of a chance we get a 90-day fiance movie
Oh,
Over your ear.
with Chip and Joanna, baby.
Chip and Joanna coming into the DCEU. They're going to be the Wonder Twins, Chip and
oh my
Joanna.
gosh.
Hey, DC ain't
Wait.
the only big boys under this new merge. There's Chip and
Chip
Joanna,
lap
baby.
everywhere.
Yep.
Everything.
Wow.
Property
Chip lap.
Brothers.
Wow.
Property
Okay.
Brothers
Brothers.
coming into the MCU. It's gonna
90
be a
Day
glorious
Fiance.
movie.
Who would you cast as the Property Brothers if you
No,
made a
no,
movie?
you have the
You have
Property
them.
Brothers.
But wouldn't you have to cast movie stars to play them?
No, they
No.
are stars. What are you talking about?
This is their moment.
The Property Brothers?
Okay.
They are the biggest stars in the world.
One of them's dating Zoe.
Married.
Married to her?
Married Zoe Deschanel.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Wow.
They're
Well,
cute.
I mean,
Then I
that's
expect to see a
big-
Property Brothers movie greenlit momentarily.
Oh, no, forget Property Brothers movie. They're coming into the MCU.
DCU?
DCEU.
Listen, Avengers headquarters need to be rebuilt.
I'm shocked.
It's like, how do we rebuild
Oh, God.
Avengers headquarters?
Damage Control,
We need the
starring the
property.
Property Brothers.
No, we got 5 of us in here, Jonathan, trying to make coffee, but it's just not enough room in here. It doesn't work. The kitchen doesn't work for us.
I know shared bathrooms was a deal breaker for all of you.
That's right.
So,
No shared bathrooms. Well, I can help with that. I mean,
All
it's
right.
going to be awesome. Damn it, my watch keeps on. My watch keeps waking
off
up.
the rails.
All right, all
Your
right.
watch just said it's nice to be right to
It's
you.
nice to be right. Question is, for you guys,
Your technology reinforces your point of view.
what do you think?
I don't have that.
What do you think about the new statements, what we're hearing coming from Warner Brothers? The new sheriffs are in town, and they're saying it's time to shake things up. DC needs its own studio. DC needs to have its own vertical. DC needs to have a singular figurehead in it to help guide and direct it under David Zaslav, who's kind of filling the Bob Iger role here. Do you think this puts DC in a better position for success than it did, say, under the old Warner Brothers regime? Maybe, hey, listen, talk is easy, though. Talk is cheap, and it's going to be real difficult to see if they can get the right people in place. Whatever you guys think about that, jump down to the comments section below and let us know your thoughts.